All right, welcome to the March 10, 2022 special meeting of the Lake Bluff Joint Planning Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals. We could call to order and have roll call, please.
Certainly. Member Danley.
Here.
Member Fisher is absent. Member Miller.
Here.
Member Russell.
Here.
Member Sorensen.
Here.
Member Toll.
Here.
Chair Peters.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2, non-agenda items and visitors' public comment time. We allocate 15 minutes during the course of the meeting for anybody who wants to approach for an issue that's not on the agenda. Anyone in the public domain that wishes to do that tonight? See none, and we're not virtual at all, right?
We are virtual. There's one member out there, I think, here perhaps for our staff report discussion, Ms. Margaret Minor, so she's a member of the Historic Preservation Commission.
Okay.
I'll mention for the benefit of everyone, so we're here in person, we're also virtual. You can use the raise your hand button in Zoom. You can use the Q&A button there at the bottom if you want to be recognized at any point during tonight's meeting.
Great, thank you, Mr. Cole. Agenda item number 3, consideration of the February 16, 2022 PCZBA regular meeting minutes. Any proposed revisions or other changes to the minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Agenda item number 3, number 4, I should say. Public hearings, wait a second, that's my, get to the right document here. Public hearing, variation, 562 Sunrise Avenue. Mr. Cole, if you could give us a brief overview, please.
Certainly. So this is a continued item from your last meeting. At that time, we had we had a full application. The applicants weren't able to join us, unfortunately, and so they asked that we wait to talk about this until this evening. And if you will give me just one moment here, a little bit of technical difficulty. Always waits until the most inopportune moment to give you a little hiccup, right? Almost there.
It's all right.
Get the hiccup out of the way early.
It's difficult to be live.
So in this case, the subject property is 562 Sunrise Avenue. This is, you might know it as the mid-century modern-looking house out there by the lakefront. They're proposing to do a renovation and a bit of addition work in the back that implicates the village's building coverage regulations and primarily our floor area regulations. So what they've shown here through their application materials, essentially, this structure is fairly large compared to the village's bulk regulations as it is. They're proposing to make some minor changes that would further increase that degree of nonconformity, mostly by adding a screened-in porch in the rear. Typically, porches like this are subject to an exemption under the village's building code rules, or excuse me, zoning rules. Just due to a small design feature on this particular one, the addition of some transom windows for architectural reasons. It's included in counting towards those floor area limits. But again, you can see in the application where we're at, they're about 50% over. If this application were approved, you'd be in the vicinity of about 60% or so. That requires action by the village board to approve. They've also voluntarily have shown what their application would look like if this house was built a little bit earlier. So because of the date the house was built, the basement counts towards floor area. That's a big chunk of it, about 40% or so. If it was built a couple years earlier, before 1950, a lot of that area would be exempt. So that's really what's driving the application from a regulatory standpoint. I know the applicant, I believe their architect and others are here to present what they're looking to do.
Good time?
Yeah, if I could swear you in, please, before we get started.
My name's Don Shoemaker. I'm here with my wife, Kim Shoemaker. She's on the application with her maiden name, Kim Parkerson. She's actually Kim Shoemaker,
Okay,
as of about 2.5 years ago.
congratulations. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God?
I do.
Okay, thank you very much. If you'd like to proceed, Mr. Shoemaker.
So my wife, Kim, and I are the owners of the house on Sunrise Avenue, and the house has a lot of history in my family. It was actually a house that my parents bought for my grandmother when my grandpa went into Westmoreland Hospital. And when my grandpa passed, my parents sold the house I grew up in Lake Bluff on Cambridge Lane, and bought the house and put on the addition, which is now the garage and the master bedroom. And about 8 or 9 years ago, I purchased the house from my mother. And Kim and I married about 2.5 years ago, and we've been spending a lot of time in the house, as a lot of people have since COVID, and it's really been a wonderful place to live. And Lake Bluff has been a wonderful town to live in, and I was fortunate to grow up in Lake Bluff. And I think our house is in a special spot at the entrance to the lake. It's a pretty prominent spot. My wife's done a really cool thing with the fairy garden out in front of the house, that if anybody walks their dogs or anything and sees the little kids out in front, it's kind of neat. And we love it, but the house is very tired. You can take a screwdriver and push right through the siding. We have more birds nesting in the house and through the siding. It's been tired and in need of major renovation for a number of years. And we're finally financially in a position where we're able to move forward and do that. So we've hired Fred and Monica with Morganti Wilson Architects, and we really like the work they've done. They recently also did the house on Mountain, which we think turned out really great. And we think we have a great plan to renovate the house. We understand that the addition is beyond what the code is. It's kind of in the back of the house. Our neighbors, who I believe we're all friendly with, I think are happy for the upgrade and the changes that we're making to it. And it's really taking area that's currently a porch and making it more of a screened-in year-round porch. But we think overall it's aesthetically, for Lake Bluff and for the neighbors and for the area, it's a good addition. And any technical or questions, I turn over to Fred and Monica to kind of present the plans for the house.
Thank you. Fred and Monica, if you could state your name for the record, and then we'll swear you in also.
Monica Mushlowski.
Okay.
Fred Wilson.
And then if you could
Wilson Architects.
raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I
I do.
Thank you. Please proceed.
So these are some updated renderings of the rear, showing a little bit more of the landscape work that's being proposed. But I believe the renderings are similar to the package that you received from last month. So the updates that we're looking to make to the house are changing a little bit of the materials for the exterior. And as Mr. Cole pointed out, the existing home is already non-conforming in many ways, so the changes in the addition to the screen porch would increase that non-conformity by a little bit, but the house is very visible on a visible part of Lake Bluff, and it's very important to us to save the mid-century modern kind of aesthetic and look of the home. So we're really looking to just, freshen the look of it and make it work a little bit better for this generation of the Shoemaker family with the addition of that screen porch.
Thank you. And then if you could, maybe review the standards for variation, if you could go through those quickly for us, please.
So these, like the practical difficulty.
Yes, please.
So practical difficulty or hardship, the existing home, as it exists today, following the strict letters of the zoning law, because we were built in 1950, We would have to follow those FAR rules, and our existing FAR is beyond what's allowable, as Mr. Cole indicated, by about 50%. So while the existing condition is already beyond that, we're kind of taking over some existing opened areas that are porch in the rear yard and converting them to a screened-in porch so it's kind of taking what's existing and putting it in a new location. But because it's existing non-conforming, we're not technically allowed to continue non-conformity with an addition. So that's kind of the hardship there.
The other hardship we have is that there are, mid-century modern structure, so we don't have any attic space. So we have zero storage. So the other thing that, again, we're exacerbating the non-conformity because we would like to put storage below the screen porch, which is not typical on a screen porch. Usually, you would just sort of do that as a frame type structure. So again, that's a big benefit that we think the homeowners need, is to actually increase the storage capacity. So that area underneath is not going to be like livable space, it's going to be purely storage.
And that kind of lends itself to the second standard, the unique physical condition. So that mid-century split level kind of style of home has the main living space, so like your dining room, family room, kitchen. It's on that a little bit higher up off the grade elevation, which creates the FAR nonconformity by including the entire basement footprint in the calculation for FAR, where other homes that are closer to the grade don't need to be counting that basement square footage in their FAR calculations. So because we want that screen porch to tie in with the rest of the home at the same living space level as the existing home, it creates the condition where it's above a certain elevation, which then counts both at that main living level and at the lower basement level. The next point, not merely special privilege. So the owners have inherited this home, and it's very important to them they really love it and want to keep most of the integrity of the style of it, and we aren't interested in doing a new construction or anything beyond that. So we really just kind of want to keep within the existing style of the home and make these small adjustments.
And I think because of this sort of, which is pretty cool, the way that it is, your first floor, your living floor is up above, which is great because you can look out over the park and, across the street and over the park. And then we wanted to have that flow, to kind of keep all the way through to the backyard, and that was, again, keeping with the mid-century modern kind of existing condition. The idea that our philosophy is like, make it look like we were never there, so that it all sort of flows, and the exterior, I mean, it's a wonderful sort of house. It needs help, so we're gonna be renovating, but keeping the vibe of it the way it looks. You can see in the renderings that it's gonna tie right into the existing.
The next standard for variation, code purposes. Variation would not result in the use or development of the subject property that would not be in harmony with the general specific purposes for which the code provision of the variance is sought and enacted. So again, we're not trying to change it's still a single family home. It's still largely, the same footprint that's currently there. So that's that standard. Then public health and safety. Again, by seeking this variation, we're not going to be impairing adequate supply of light or air to adjacent properties, or increasing congestion, or increasing hazards of fire. Like, it's all kind of within the existing footprint.
We did look at like putting it on the south end at one point, but we felt that would impact our neighbor to the south. So we didn't do it that way. The north end is really where the master is up higher, so it didn't make sense to go up the stairs to go out that way as well. So we thought coming out the middle portion of the house would also not get into the planes of light of either of our neighbors or anything in terms of impacting them as well. So we tried to be minimal with where it came out through the middle.
Yep.
Do you have any questions for us?
Yeah, I think there'll be a few, probably.
Yeah?
Whoever would like to start?
I've got a couple questions. It looks like in the renderings, and if I'm looking at this plan correctly, that the addition will also include a walkout basement, is that right?
From the
From
basement
there?
area, yeah, we
Is
felt
it-
like,
Is it currently a walkout basement?
no.
It is not.
Okay. Okay. And then is the space under the porch, the storage space, is that gonna be a conditioned space?
Yes.
It is, just not habitable.
Yeah, we're not even gonna drywall it.
Okay,
I mean,
so
it's just
unfinished but conditioned.
gonna be a storage space, but it will be conditioned so they can put furniture or things like that in there.
Got it, okay. And then I've got just a general question. The transom windows that creates this, that eliminates the porch exemption, I feel like, why would that eliminate the porch exemption in the first place?
Yeah.
It seems,
So the policy question is a different one. I mean, I can answer literally, right, which is the code anticipated that you'd have really an open porch and that there'd be railings and columns and maybe some, I think the code literally says architectural lattice elements at the top. So it wasn't anticipating different
so,
forms
okay,
perhaps,
so
or it chose not to include.
perhaps our code is too restrictive in that sense?
Well, when
That would be a
I mean,
policy
it seems
question.
like just having transom windows,
yeah, but that makes,
This
excuse me,
exemption-
Aaron, but that makes it a room that you can live in year-round. So you're actually increasing your area of your house, I would
well, if it's
assume.
only transom windows above screening, then
Is that what it is, transom,
Yes.
or is it gonna be completely enclosed?
It's the top part, are transom windows.
And the rest is
and then
screened?
The rest would be.
Yeah, I agree with you, Aaron. What difference does it make?
okay, thank you.
Okay. Is there an issue currently with flooding at your house?
Oh, we get water in the basement, that we'll address when we renovate with, you know, with tile, with drainage tile, but not severe.
Okay, because your walkout basement is like on an incline, so I question whether that's gonna make that worse, but that's your problem. I see that the impervious surface still is within code, once this addition is that what I'm reading this correctly?
That's our understanding what the architect has shown, yes.
Okay, so we can't really make a complaint about that. Are you gonna put a swimming pool in the back?
Yes.
Well, my wife would like to.
That comes before that?
Some people think it's kind of silly, but
Not a large one, it's not gonna be a large.
Does that come before this committee?
In the sense that, so all other things being equal, if they didn't need, you know, the porch in the back, things like that, you wouldn't, if you had the house as it was today and they just wanted to add the pool, that would not need to come before.
Okay, so that doesn't impact the impervious surface, because it's
It does count towards impervious surface. It's still within that.
still within that range.
Allowable.
Yeah.
I think just the reason we did the transoms on the rear elevation, you can see the transoms over our dining room, the current. We just felt that, you know, picking up that language would help. And then these windows over here have the high up transoms as well. So we, again, tried to knit that into the fabric of the rear elevation. So that's where we came up with those. I don't sell transoms for a living.
I was just gonna mention that I really feel like you have a legitimate hardship with the house and when it was built and the time and, you know, also, you know, we're here to try to, you know, better our community and build on a lovely couple that wants to stay in generational home. I think that is something to be said. The one thing, talking about landscape and screening, I would think that you would need screening from the 3-story play lot that you have at the neighbor at 700 Center. You know, I would think that they could be looking down onto your screen porch, and I just want to go on record that maybe that's not something we talk about in this meeting, but how is that approved? And these people have to come and pay a lot of money and time and have a superior architecture firm working on their home, and they have this play lot that's almost 2.5 stories tall next to them. Just a little sidebar, but I do think that it's a, you know, it's a lovely thing. I was gonna question about the pool as well, because I didn't know how that falls into our role or not, but, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Danley. Ms. Sorensen?
My questions, excuse me, my questions have been raised already, so I think that there are some improvements needed for the home, so I appreciate you coming before us and working at that. And I was also really concerned with the impervious surfaces, so thanks for clearing that up.
Mr. Russell?
Just a question for staff. Have we heard from any of the neighbors?
We have not before this evening. You have one wanting to comment here in a little bit.
Yeah, I don't have any other questions. I just want to comment that the home is much lower than what would normally be allowed on a lot that size, and as a result, it does not appear to be as bulky as the numbers would indicate. If we just saw the numbers and didn't see the pictures, didn't know where the home was, you'd think this home must be way too big for the lot, but it is way under. With the issue with the floor regulation, you just fall on the wrong side of the numbers. So it seems like in terms of the calculations, you just fall on the wrong side of the regs on a number of different issues, including the transom windows, where it wouldn't be, the porch wouldn't be counted otherwise. So I don't have any overall concerns with the project. I would like to alert the homeowner, though, that you're probably going to have a pump to pump out that window well, because you can't, the storm sewer system is not nearly as deep as your,
Sumps.
so you're going to have to pump all that water from the pool and everything else. It will not work by gravity.
Yeah.
So as long as you're aware of that.
Just a couple questions, and George hit on one of them. What is the maximum height of the home right now?
Right now, we're about 20 feet.
That's it?
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, to echo your point, it is shocking, the number, but it is really like a 1-story in a pop-up where the master bedroom is, but it is a much more, into the ground, home with the only being 20 feet at the highest point, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And
And
then
again, I think we're allowed 35,
34 in this.
34,
Yeah.
so we're well under that. But I do think it's deceiving, but I think the character won't be changed.
Yeah, no, I think that's very, very important, and not really related to our purview, but the exterior, how will that change as far as composition?
Really not much. I mean, we're really looking at, painting, the street facade. We're doing new windows, so we're gonna upgrade that. But it really will be very subtle, in terms of what the transition will be.
Okay.
We're doing, opening up the windows so that you can, from the whole living area, that you can really, that outside can come inside. I think that's really important. But it's really gonna feel and function. The windows are all very tired, and as he pointed out, the siding is pretty rotted, so we're gonna be replacing that, but it's gonna be very subtle.
Okay. Any other questions from the panel right now, or any questions from the public in general? Or comments, further comments?
I do have one to read when you're ready, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, now's the time.
Sure. So, again, part of Zoom, we don't require people to appear here in person anymore. They can dial in, they can submit things in writing. This is from Miss Margaret Miner, and I'll read this out loud. This is Margaret Miner of 552 Sunrise Avenue, the immediate neighbor to the south. The plan and attention to detail is terrific. The exception being requested doesn't negatively impact the neighbors and greatly improves the function for the shoemakers. I hope you will be in support of this petition.
Oh, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay. Hearing none, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, and the motion is?
He moves to recommend the
Motion to
village board
recommend to the
approve the
village board.
requested relief.
Yes, move to recommend to the village board to approve the requested relief.
Thank you. All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, is there a vote, please?
Member Miller.
Aye.
Member Toll.
Aye.
Member Danley.
Aye.
Member Sorensen.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Chair Peters.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
No.
Thank you very much.
I do
Other
hope
renderings?
that your Christmas garden comes back next year. That was
Please.
quite a treat out there on the edge of the sidewalk this year.
Yeah.
And I hope the birds return, although maybe you don't want them to.
You want these renderings back?
No.
I don't know how they can stand the noise. We love it when we walk by there.
All right, agenda item number 5, I believe.
That's correct.
We can get it.
Yeah, public hearing, special use permit, 921 Sherwood Drive, the farm. Mr. Cole, if you could give a brief overview, please.
Certainly.
Gotta crack.
So in this case, this is, so 921 Sherwood Drive is a multi-tenant building. Currently, there is a office in the front, an anesthesia partner, something of that nature, I believe. And in the back, up until recently, there was like a disaster relief and recovery firm that was using that as like a warehouse and staging space. What we have here with us, a representative from CMP Management LLC, what they're proposing to do is to establish a 26,000 square foot indoor turf facility in the rear. I know internally as the staff that I've heard that compared to Slammers. If you're familiar with that facility out towards, that's in Libertyville. Essentially, it's indoor turf. You have, I'll let the applicant explain more, but you have different athletic, games and training and things of that nature. So this club is proposed to be operated on a membership basis. That makes it a special use in this district. So again, you can undertake that activity subject to certain standards. The applicant has addressed those in the application. So the memorandum goes into some planning discussion, just again, a refresher on what we're seeing in this district. We know that the values in this district continue to increase. The attractiveness of putting non-typical industrial uses in this area continues to increase. We've seen proposals in this area, including animal hospital, animal training. Of course, there's retail establishments within the district now. We've continue to see industrial tenants exit and different tenants, for example, a self-storage facility perhaps, working in there. So we're seeing this district evolve in many ways. That was contemplated by the village's Waukegan Road Corridor study about 10 years ago or so. I'll just say from our staff review, we would recommend paying attention to a couple things more closely. The biggest challenge we see in our review of this will be parking and loading and just, 40 kids come in, 40 kids go out, and how do you manage that, especially mostly working out of this rear parking lot with what is just close to a 2-lane driveway going into the back. How do you manage that, especially with the hours of operation for this facility, where you're getting into a darker period of night in a facility that's probably not that well lit as it is, but also balancing, trying to make that situation work with just the realities of being a tenant in a multi-tenant building that you don't necessarily own, and and so on. You know, how much can you reasonably ask for? What improvements are reasonable to receive? And can you strike the right balance in making this use work as well as possible? Especially given to, I'll note that it's not within the village's limits, but just to the south through some landscaping through a berm, there's a residential neighborhood too in Lake Forest, and so we want to be mindful of that as well. So there's some analysis in here of the parking. Certainly we suggest that to the extent, and the applicant will speak a bit more to this, but we suggest that we don't want to see that driveway. If there's parking and loading happening in the front, we don't want to see that driveway used as a pedestrian access as well as the vehicles. We really want to keep those as separated as possible. We also have some typical site plan issues that would come up either way, whether this was a special use permit or not, that we'd recommend including in your conditions of approval. That includes lighting, knowing that the hours of operation and the traffic will make that of concern. That parking plan, making sure we have enough spaces and the circulation will work, especially for a large number of, SUVs, parents, loading and drop off. That's not typical to this area. And then a little one, you have to have an enclosure for trash and recycling in this district. You've had to have that for a while right now. There's not an enclosure there, and we just want to make sure that's provided as this use comes online. So happy to answer any questions, or again, I know the applicant is here with us to present.
A quick question for you, Glenn.
Sure.
The issue of the lighting and the architectural border review, are they required to go to the architectural border review, or are you recommending that the PCZBA recommend that they go to the ABR in order to?
It would be very difficult to start this use without something sending you to the architectural border review. I mean, you have to have signage, you will probably have to have improvements to the lot, but tenants do change without having to go to the architectural border review, and we just want to make sure no matter what, these issues are addressed and that they're a condition of this special use permit.
Okay. So you would prefer that it be part of our motion if we so deem that we recommend approval?
That's correct.
Good, thank you, Mr. Cole. Thank you, Mr. Russell. Petitioners, if you could state your name for the record, and then we'll swear you in. Maybe everybody stand, we'll swear you all in and go from there.
Hey, Board. John Seaman.
Okay,
And this is Jim Karras and Ralph Huizenga.
thank you. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please proceed.
As Mr. Cole said, I'm presenting the farm as an indoor training facility geared towards youth activities, but not limited to youth. I see it as primarily a drop-off, pickup kind of scenario. I've enclosed not such a professional parking plan, but something that I think could work. But then there's several options that we have for drop-offs on the north side of the building and creating a walkway, eliminating from the driveway side and actually doing option B, which would be on the east side of the building and continue all the way to the rear entrance of the building. For the lighting concerns, I would suggest maybe mounting parking lot lights on the building and have them project across the parking lot, eliminating the need to run electrical through the existing parking area, if the board sees that sufficient enough. And I feel that there's areas that we could add the trash enclosure if necessary, or when necessary.
So part of the selection of this location was exactly what is an issue is the parking. We like the parking on the backside of the building and stacking all internal to the site and not spill out onto the street. So we think if we configure it properly with your guidance, we can go ahead and sufficiently do that because it'll be on site and in the parking, in the backside of the facility. So I'm an investor in this, but I'm also going to be hopefully a member. I've got a 10-year-old son who's in the baseball program and want to go ahead and take full advantage of this facility. We think it's going to be a great amenity to the area, both to Lake Bluff and Lake Forest, the baseball leagues here, the high school, et cetera. We've had some interest from all those groups for lacrosse, for dance, for basketball, et cetera. So we're excited about this opportunity. We think this is a great location for it.
here to answer questions.
Oh, okay. Oh, who'd like to take the first set of questions?
I'll start. Would you mind, can you project up the plan view of the facility? Would you mind just giving us a quick run-through of, none of these spaces are labeled except I can make out a basketball court, but I'm wondering what all this,
So,
all this is. And
the main entrance that we're
hold
proposing.
on until
Okay.
till he gets the
Oh, yeah,
view
sorry.
up there,
That sheet right there, remember, Russell?
whichever one is easier for you.
Okay.
And then if you could flip it north to south maybe and point out the rear yard. Just took me a while to figure out what was up and what was down.
The basketball court is on the west side of the building, so if we looked at it.
West, so, west side.
There we go. So on the left-hand side, which would be the west end of the building, you see a basketball court. Just to the south of that was where we were proposing the main entrance. So as you come in, the black area there would be your front desk area / check-in, check-out. To the immediate left, there's 5 cages that we're proposing, which would be turfed, and then each enclosed so that you could have individual work with the coach or with yourself off a tee, throwing, et cetera. The basketball court is pretty self-explanatory. If you move towards the north, you come to the first turfed area, and that area actually extends to the right all the way. You can see the yard line markers. Those are each 5 yards, the black lines, from left to right to the east end of the building. So you get a total of 80 yards there, I think it is. I forget what it worked out to be. And then in that larger area, which works out to be about 14,000 square feet, it would be all turfed area where you could have those cages that are there, the 4 of them, could actually lift up to the ceiling. You could have an open field area. You could have the 4 cages, which you could do individual work in. You could also divide it into 4 different areas where the 2 cages are, or the 4 cages, each one of those would be a separate area. The middle would be a separate area, and then the back area would be separate too. Giving them open fields plays. You can work on football drills, baseball drills. We could fit in a regular sized field with a pitching mound to home plate and get first, second, and third base almost. So teams could kind of go through their infield drills.
Okay, so the primary emphasis is definitely youth training.
Youth
sports.
training, correct. Yes, so for team organized.
Adults, but it's generally, you haven't described any like workout area. It's,
There's not a weight area currently. Any weights would probably be free weights, or in that white area it's currently a loading dock. If we could, adjust that to make that usable for maybe a weight area. We were thinking more for adults would be something to fill the daytime when the kids are at school. But they can also do workouts without weights too.
so you must have developed some projections on how many people you think might be using this at any one time to back, because you.
Yeah, and
what's weird
that's a
about
big
that
concern.
is You don't have your own projections of traffic load, or need for, or a projection of how many parking spaces you need.
Well,
Just relying on some formula that's pulled from a book, but what?
Exactly,
What do
and
you actually
the
think-
scheduling's all gonna be app-based, how the world works now, so you'll know what cages are being utilized, what cages are not, what time. You'd have to reserve your time, almost like a tea time, to come in. And, the majority of the clients are gonna be youth under the age of 16, so there's gonna be drop-off. I project, say, 50 members at a time would be acceptable to be in this space. If you look at, you can Google search everything or research, a gym of 5,000 square feet can handle 500 members. And so we're 5.2 times larger than that. Definitely not going to get to that high. I'm looking to cap at 400 individual members and 500 team members. So a total of 900 members.
Okay, and then you had mentioned a parking, an access plan B.
Correct, so.
We have a hand-drawn sketch,
Yes.
and then we have something that came in the packet, which,
Look at the last hand-drawn sketch, because I was working with Mr. Cole on that. If you look on the east side of the building, you'll see it looks like a sidewalk. So there's a front parking area that has 31 spots with an entrance and an exit. It's a loop around. We could actually utilize that and have drop-off on the far east side of the building and have the members walk down that side and into the rear entrance. They're all going to be members, so they'll know where to go. It's not like I'm not pulling people off the street. It's,
Not allowed to use that during up until what time?
we can use the pass-through at any time. You just can't park there.
Right, I'm sorry, I thought you'd made a statement about parking a certain number of cars in the front.
Oh, we could park in the front. There's 31 spots that are available. Correct. Sorry, yeah, you're correct. But we won't utilize those until after hours of the front offices, which is, I believe their hours are 9 to 6? 5. 9 to 5.
Because this, I'm assuming during the week, this will be an after-school drop-off period, would be your high-demand period during the
You
week.
figure like 4 o'clock probably
So-
would be.
So at that time, you're not allowed to use the front for parking?
For parking, but we're allowed to use it for passing through.
And then the two, your plan is so undeveloped at this point. At what point, Glenn, would the access, is you're intending that the staff would approve the access?
Yeah, so we had some discussion about this internally. Our thought is, we have, typically, let's say this isn't, it's a bit of a double bind, right? So typically, this isn't a special use. Someone wants to come in, they want to redesign their parking lot. In some communities, that might come to the Plan Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals. In ours, it doesn't. It would just go through the Architectural Board of Review. And, we're struggling in that, we want to be, the many parts of the access plan, the parking plan is important, but it's a small part overall of the standards for special use and ultimately how palatable this is for the village. And so we want to be in a place where, we're not, preferably we don't want to, how do I phrase this? In an ideal world, right, if the use is a non-starter, you don't want to have an applicant incurring architectural design fees, engineering fees, et cetera, to not get anywhere. Right, we want to be friendly, but it also puts us in the point, in the situation you're getting at, Member Russell. That's why our recommendation suggests that the Architectural Board of Review could look at and approve the final access plan that has to provide this minimum level of parking, that has to provide an appropriate circulation plan.
So is it the access along the east side that you've drawn in there, it runs through a little patio. Does that little patio serve the office in the front?
No, it serves actually the building in the back.
Okay, and so there's a door into your facility there. Are you envisioning possibly that could be the access point then and have a very short walk?
It could be. It kind of changes the layout of the large area where I'm trying to maximize the space that is turfed, and could deem to be not the safest way in if there's people playing in that large area.
Okay.
You know,
Because the
we
west
could,
side-
it could be fenced off.
The west side, you've got a walkway dotted in there, but there's a giant transformer and gas facility up against the building that would preclude a sidewalk going down the west side of the building. So, and I guess we're just gonna have to rely on staff to approve a plan before you'd get a building permit. Just doesn't seem like it's very thought through at all. And then the final question is the lot surface itself is atrocious. Is the landlord part of your deal? Are they going to resurface the access driveway and the rear lot? Because it certainly shouldn't be used by youth in the condition that it's in. Used by anyone in the condition that it's in.
Absolutely correct, George. Reason being, the tenant that was back there for at least 10 years and maybe more was bringing flatbed, full-length trucks back there. They were bringing huge generators that they track across the nation, to exterior generators when the power goes out in the whole town. They sent the troops, all right, so it was that kind of a company. And my point being, all of that heavy-duty equipment, they were dragging it out of there, and the parking lot reflects that. So yes, I represent the owner of the building, and yeah, he no matter whom, whether John's firm or any firm moves in there, it's gotta be redone, and he knows that. There's a number of things that need to be done to the building. Again, that's been a long-term tenant in there, and they never had customers or clients or anybody coming to the building, so they didn't really care too much. For them, it was strictly a functional operation. And, you know, also I would suggest to you, part of why you're correct, it's not maybe that well developed, is that normally, if he'd signed a lease already and so he knew he was good to go, he would have invested more presumably in getting, you know, architectural drawings and things like that. The owner is unwilling to sign a lease because if he doesn't get approval, he's stuck with a lease that you know, it doesn't help anybody. So there's a little bit of a cart and horse thing going on. But in the bigger picture, yeah, the owner knows that. I would also throw out to you, I've just had discussions with him this morning, and that is, yeah, these are hand-done drawings, but that front office area, it's possible, and he said he is willing to have part of that go with the rear space, so potentially people could come right from the front of the building and use the parking lot in the front. The reality of it is his business, Anastasia Partners, I don't know if it's because of COVID or a combination of people want to work out of their houses or whatever, but if you drive by there any given day right now, he's using maybe a third of the parking lot because some of his employees, they've outsourced, overseen, and all that stuff, the manpower. So he's got 7,200 square feet, the entire front of the building right now, and he's occupying that. If he put everybody in one area, he could give up a third of that space easily, and I've talked to him about potentially doing that. You could easily pop a door on the front of the building there, coming right off the parking lot, that would lead straight back to the area that John's talking about. I mean, he's flexible to altering the building to the extent that it would make it work for John. On the flip side, he doesn't want to, like I say, he's not willing to sign a lease and everything until he knows that he's got the way to do it. And so I recognize we're coming to you and kind of not giving you something that's clear cut, but if you have a way around that, I'd happily entertain it. I'm not sure what the right approach would be to make that happen. But I know, you know, the owner, he's, you know, more than open to the idea of it. And it just, he hasn't green-lighted it because he doesn't know if it's even generally going to be approved. I mean, maybe it's something where conceptually you could say, yeah, if you did these things to the building, then we would think that could work. Again, I apologize because I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer, anything like that, so I don't know what comes first or whatever, but, you know, maybe some guidance might help, you know, as well, if that makes any sense.
Listen, one of our jobs being on the PCZBA is to encourage thoughtful development or just appropriate commercial development in the light industry district, right? That's part of our job. And so we're here listening to you, bring something to us, and we're just trying to encourage as best we can. And you're right, it is a little preliminary, and we understand this, you know, I certainly understand the situation that you're in. But I also think that we, as a whole, want to make something work as long as something is being done that's very thoughtful moving forward. And I agree, staff and us or any other committee that you need to go in front of, I'm sure the Architectural Review Board will with the lighting and the things that I had questions on. I'm sure they're going to be having their eyes on it or staff. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it's really great that we're trying to get something to the industrial portion of our town that is encouraging people to keep active and put down the computer and do the things that we want as parents and the community to be part of and be active. So the concept is great. We just want to help you get to that next part about, you know, putting all the pieces together properly.
That's great. And again, I'm only representing the owner, so please understand I'm not a partner in this. I have no
Right.
If no other dog in this fight, so to speak. There's a gentleman that's looking to put it together, and he's got, it sounds like a good backing behind him, in terms of having already contacted other, not just parents, but the people at the high schools and things like that.
I do have one question, though. I think I read that there's 5 staff, and it just seemed like such a minimum number with the amount of volume that you're thinking that.
Sorry, 5 full-time
Okay.
staff members, and I was planning at least, right now, 10 part-time, and what I was thinking is, would be either high school seniors, juniors, older kids home from break, to be there alternate days to kind of assist with directing the younger kids that are using it or playing catch with them, or just making sure that there's not chaos.
Did you do any comparisons with that facility in Libertyville on what staff they have or what they?
Yeah, I've been to all the facilities around, I've used them, and I find that they're very not user-friendly. You go there and there's no direction, you're kind of lost, like a kid could come walk in and not know what to do and not feel welcomed. So I want to eliminate that. Also, they're pretty much geared towards their club teams and will not let you use their areas even though they're open, if you're not a member of another higher membership of their club.
Let me assure you, I still don't know I know what I'm doing in a batting cage, so that's, you can put up all the signs you want, some of us are beyond help.
Yeah, and there's automated batting cages, there's stuff now that you can play a whole game inside of a batting cage and play at any single major league field that you want to, minor league field that you want to. It will project spin rate, distance, it's unbelievable what can be done with technology now. But you also still need to get out there and physically do it. And we've all seen that, we got to keep our kids active and in a safe spot.
This would have been a good idea for them to come to us preliminary to get our opinion rather than as an open hearing, as a public hearing. So I think you put the cart before the horse, because we do preliminary assessments without having to go through the process of having a public meeting. And my understanding or my thoughts are that this is a good idea. I would be in favor of pursuing and allowing this to happen through the zoning. But as stated, it is too preliminary to do anything from our perspective, I believe. I mean, if you want an okay, we can vote and give you an okay to go forward. I don't believe any of us would send this to the village board at this point.
Glenn, is the intention to process, and I'm sorry to ask the process question again, that it's going to go to the architectural board of review before it would go to the village board? For the matter of the lights, Mr. Seaman had stated he's hoping that he can get approval to mount the lights right on the building to save cost, but I know there's going to be a thought that they don't want the lights projecting towards the neighborhood to the south. And if that's a deal, I would think this should go before to the ABR to talk about those issues before.
Don't you think we need a true architectural rendering of what's going to be done rather than handwritten by the owner?
Sure. So let's, I'll describe how we envision this working perhaps, and then some alternatives. So what we saw is a path forward would be, you recommend this, we would, and just conditional on, you'd recommend approval of the special use permit, and before they commence the use, they'd have to go through architectural board of review, they'd have to get site plan approval, but essentially those processes are separate, right? So they'll get their special use permit, they'll be able to consummate their lease, and then at some point, it might be next month, it might be a few months from now, they'll have to go through the architectural board of review, finish that process before they can pull a permit, before they can use the permit they've been given.
But they wouldn't have to come back here then, because we've given them this.
In that, under that course of action, yes. Now, you have some alternatives. One is you can continue this hearing, you can give them a little over a month with the timing of this to prepare a plan to come back. Another would be you can require them to go to the architectural board of review, first before this is acted on by the village board. That's another alternative. I'll note here, Typically, the board would do, they'd do first reading next Monday, second reading in 2 weeks, so they wouldn't have, but just because of how our meetings fall with spring break right now, they wouldn't have a chance to go to the ABR first. We could certainly, I think we could arrange the scheduling if the applicant's schedule allows that to where, you know, I think it's reasonable to ask that they would go to the architectural board of review before they, you know, just once preliminarily before that approval of the ordinance. But again, there is a, I would emphasize, right, I'm sure they can tell you, there's a timing issue here. I'm sure that the landlord doesn't want to keep that, that property, you know, tied up and not profitable for so long. And that's an element of risk they would have to bear.
Our job tonight is to decide whether that is an appropriate use for the space, right? It's the lighting, the traffic, I guess, is part of that, but in my mind, is that a good use in that zoning district? And in my mind, it is. I think it's a great use. I have young children. I look forward to having them use that space. So I'm comfortable with moving forward with recommending approval of the special use, knowing that there are going to be other steps that will have to be followed, and the lighting and the driveway and parking, I think, are the two big sticking points for us right now. But as far as the use goes, I think it's great.
Glenn, if I may, is it possible for us to make sure there aren't any public comments? It seems like we're moving towards possibly the end of deliberation.
Absolutely, yeah. So none at this moment. Certainly have a couple people watching online. I'll note out loud, no one else here in Village Hall.
Okay.
If you'd like to be recognized, if you'd like to speak, you've got that raise hand button at the bottom of your screen or the Q&A button, either or.
What sort of distance are we dealing with in the back from the neighbors?
I don't have an exact measurement. It's a pretty good distance from what I know. It would be, I think it's Carroll Court in Lake Forest is the subdivision. There is a wetland area, then I believe there's a pond, but I don't know how far west that pond stretches. Then there's a road, and then there's the front yards, and then it's the home. So it's gotta be over 1,000 feet at least.
Okay.
But that's just,
That's
my,
right.
Probably like 300 or 400 to the house, not 1,000, but.
Well,
Glenn
the
can
distance.
measure it right now for us. There's that measuring
Can I walk
tool.
up there?
Yeah.
Sure.
So which is the subject? This is it?
So this is you right here,
This is
and
240 feet.
You're one over, you're one over. You're to
This
the
one?
left, yes.
Okay, so this is 240 feet.
Yep.
So you're looking at 520, maybe?
I've got it about 350 plus or minus corner to corner. So, I mean, you do have quite a bit of ways there. This is, there's quite a bit of screening. I mean, historically, I haven't heard of this neighborhood being at issue with development here since the development of Pesquazy. I believe that neighborhood organized a bit around that topic. That was over 10 years ago.
But there is looks like there is a lot of screening, though.
And they can design the lighting so it goes towards the
And
building. rather
Just to correct about the lighting and the parking, I just was proposing it on the buildings because I've seen it in other buildings around that area, and with the technology of LED lighting now, you can adjust it so it doesn't go past a certain foot. I'm not looking to cut cost. I want to do it. I want everyone to be safe. Safety is the top priority. The turf that would be going into this facility is the best turf. You know, it's the same stuff that they've used at Hallis Hall, the Philadelphia Eagles, the St. Louis Cardinals. So safety's top priority here. So I'm not looking to cut cost. If we have to install lights, we install lights.
And then how many batting cages will you have?
On this, I have a total of 9, but I'm thinking I might need more. But those batting cages will be able to be lifted up and taken out of use. If you go to a lot of these other facilities, we were just at a facility in Wisconsin that has a tournament in the wintertime, and they had about 20 cages. And that seems to be where the kids get their most benefit.
And does all that sound stay within the structure, or does it emanate outside to any great extent?
It's the sound of a ball hitting a metal bat. So you'll have some audio, but it shouldn't be blaring outside of the structure, no.
Okay.
But I don't, when I was a member of Slammers, and when you, in the parking lot there, you don't hear constant hitting of balls.
Any space for a golf simulator?
That's next, yeah. But for the parents that come, for drop-off, it would be great because there's other stuff in the area. You can go to Pasquazi's, Target, but also we'd like to keep them there.
I think that this is a good idea for the area, certainly, and hopefully a good use of space. My concerns, as you pointed out, my top concerns are safety, which will be parking, traffic flow, pedestrians, and lighting.
Yeah, and
All interrelated. If that building has had, I believe we read in the materials, semis going in 24/7, then noise and lighting, I think, are a little bit less of an issue, hopefully. But, yeah, I think lighting for pedestrians coming and going, and impetuous ones at that, is very important.
yes, and the one parking plan that I did, I apologize that it's hand-drawn, but there's a lot of time that's went into other things about this, is, there's a drop-off area in the back that we could utilize if you deemed acceptable,
I'll also mention, again, in our staff review, we looked at the drawing originally presented with the application. We looked at a second drawing from Mr. Seaman. We looked at the one included in your packet, which was a third variation. The village engineer looked at that as well. Again, the thought was that there would be, that the applicant could get to a workable plan of some type if this was fully developed.
Okay, so we're still iterating, and we'll,
I more just meant that we were comfortable, we did not want to give a negative recommendation in this. We think that a good plan is within the realm of the possible. We didn't think that this Plan B was, and the dimensions are reasonable. It can be
right,
turned into something.
okay.
How critical is the timetable? Ideally, how quickly can you turn this around? How quickly, Ralph, can you get the back repaved, things like that?
Frankly, it's gonna, until he knows who's gonna move into that space, that will somewhat determine what work he's gonna have to do.
Okay.
I mean, parking lot's gonna need to get dealt with, I understand that. But recognizing the kind of use that John's doing is a much nicer use than that building's ever seen. So, it's a positive for the landlord, and it would be John's company that would be making a big investment in it as well. He'd be doing a long-term lease on the space. My owner is willing to make it usable for another company who wants to come in and handle freight and takes up, not dissimilar from the previous usage, hopefully a little bit better in how they treat the space. But my point being, right now it's an industrial building, and that's what the neighborhood has been over the years, and it's getting improved. There's a lot of now there's the pediatric at the hospital, but the
Lake Forest
doctor's
Pediatrics.
offices. I mean, it's changing fairly dramatically. I mean, I'm a pro, right? But there's another gym right down the street, Vlad's Gym, in one of the buildings, and there's the racquetball and tennis guys around the bend. I mean, so the area is changing, and so in my sense, or my opinion, it could be a very positive change. So it'll make the building a lot nicer than it would be, or my owner would not have to make it all that nice for another company to come in and bring semis and bring product in, product out, a logistics company or something like that, because they're not going to care that much. For them, it's strictly a function. It's got 2 docks, it's got 3 overhead doors, it's got decent ceiling height, 18-foot clear. It's very functional space for the original design purpose as it stands right now. And so to answer your question, some of the improvements that the landlord would make will be somewhat predicated upon who's going to take the space.
And then, John, what's your timetable, ideally?
I'm ready to go whenever, everyone is comfortable with this and we can make it safe for everyone involved. So it's more trying to keep the owner happy so that, you know, it's all about location. There's not that many other buildings that this would work in, so. But, you know, the order turf, everything with supply stuff is 8 weeks out, you know, netting 6 weeks out. So the earliest, if say got approved, everything went perfect tonight, I know, but it would be maybe August.
Oh,
Would be the
that's what I was wondering.
earliest.
It's not gonna be like July 4th or June 1st or anything.
No, it would be the earliest open date, but I would definitely enter into a lease before that so I could do the necessary repairs on the inside that I need to do.
Okay. I mean, well, I don't want to speak for the entire panel, but I think conceptually, we're probably all in agreement as to where we think it's going and where it should go. I think we've identified the critical issues. I know Glenn in the preparatory materials identified, I think, virtually all the critical issues: parking, traffic, lighting, sound, impact, that will be addressed by other entities. So, any further comment from the commissioners or any comment from the public as a whole, virtually?
I just want to clarify that I am in favor of this use. I ended up grilling the applicant, I guess, on all the things that need to be done, and I'm concerned for you because there's a lot that needs to be done outside of this building. And it sounds like you really don't want to sign a lease until you know what the village is going to require. So I'm still
Correct.
wondering how you're going to work. You know, you're going to have to get to our architectural board of review sooner rather than later, I would think, to help the applicant along. Because if the ABR, if they can't get access to the building and the ABR requires a new walkway constructed all along the east side of the facility, it's, you're gonna have to jog around some things in the back corner that aren't shown on your plans. You know, there's gonna be costs that you're gonna need to figure out with the owner, but.
That's
yeah, I'm in-
understood completely. But knowing moving forward that this would be a use that it was accepted by the board, you know, we could further look at that entrance on the north side of the building, which would eliminate any walkways on the exterior. Guests are getting out of their car and walking 10 feet into a door that's enclosed then, and you're inside of a building, which is safe. And then we could eliminate the exterior walkways. Just not knowing if this use would even be allowed in the area prohibit us exploring that.
Any other questions for the petitioners? I just have one quick question.
Yes.
Any impact on the veterinary clinic, other than traffic coming in and off of Waukegan Road?
None that I see. There's another building in between.
Oh, there is another one in
Yeah, there's Body Fix, which I think is another athletic facility.
Dermatologist, the dermatology. with
And the
body fixing
dermatology
that.
building. So there's like dermatology, the Body Fix, and then I actually showed Dr. McKenna this plan. He wrote a little
I
letter.
saw the
Yeah,
note.
he's a good friend.
Okay.
And then Axel over there, he's a good friend too. And so is Ernie Samersky, who I think just bought next this Medville building.
Okay.
And your business is gonna be called The Farm and not The Farm of Lake Forest?
Not the farm of Lake Forest. It's the farm for the farm
Finally.
system.
Industrial park
You know,
is
the-
starting to consider businesses that are calling themselves. And I noticed your marketing materials also said you were gonna locate in North Lake Forest.
said that.
The letter that went out to all the baseball people.
Oh, I sit on the board of LFBA, so that's probably that's the first organization that I attacked, and I didn't want to waste anyone else's time if it wasn't going to be anything that was possible.
Well, I'd be happy to move that we recommend approval, the village board grant the requested relief in the form of the draft ordinance, provided that the 3 items that are outlined in the staff memo to be addressed by the architectural board of review, that they get addressed by the architectural board of review. I don't think you want me to read those off, or you can, just by reference?
Be helpful with, to include some language. For instance, what's the third?
A, B,
Oh,
and
it's
C.
A, B, and C within
closure of the-
2, gotcha. Are you recommending item number 1 as well?
Yes, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, the two items that are, the 2 major items.
Okay.
The second item has 3 parts. And then also that we shouldn't allow the use of the facility without the parking lot being redone. And I don't even want to know what's in those 6 drums that are back behind the building from
They're gone.
demolition.
The drums are gone.
They are gone?
Everything's been removed except for the transformer's still there on the corner on the east side.
And also that the entire property, beyond the parking lot, apparently the previous tenant used it as a dump. There's concrete, it's terrible back there. It should,
Tore out some bricks, or they put another opening in it.
concrete debris.
There was some trailers there, I think.
Yeah, the entire property needs to get cleaned up, and I hope. that
Image
can
is
all be
really
part of it.
important in this because there's going to be a lot of parents dropping off and a lot of moms dropping off and dads that if it looks like a dump, they'll think it's a dump. So I am definitely for landscaping and beautifying the appearance of it because that means a lot.
Previous tenant literally moved out just about everything. Just over a week ago, today's the 9th, 10th.
Today's the 10th, so about 8 days ago, yeah.
They were there, they just moved out 10 days ago, and then they were there to the bitter end. They had a lot of stuff there. I mean, you saw that aerial photo earlier that you showed when we were looking at the buffer. If you looked at the back of the building, a lot of stuff.
We have a motion, is there a second?
If I just may clarify, is that then a third condition, the repaving of the parking lot to your motion?
And the cleanup of the entire property, including removal of those barrels if they're not gone.
Okay, just making sure for
no.
Glenn.
Thank you,
Thank
Brady.
you.
I'll do it.
Okay, second then.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none. We can have roll call, please.
Certainly. Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Toll.
Aye.
Member Miller.
Aye.
Member Sorensen.
Aye.
Member Danley.
Aye.
Chair Peters.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. What, do you want to give them their timetable, where they go from here?
Yeah, so, Mr. Seaman, et cetera, we'll have you, your first reading with the village board will be this Monday. And I can I'll give you a write-up tomorrow on next steps from here, and we can talk by phone tomorrow too, if you like. So. Cool.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Agenda item number 6. Staff report. Historic preservation incentives. Mr. Cole?
Certainly. So a couple housekeeping items and then the subject of the written memorandum. So on work planning work, we were hoping to have one of a couple items to you at this meeting. Timing for those didn't necessarily work out for a few reasons, mostly due to the proximity of spring break and personnel availability, things like that. So we're still working towards bringing you some administrative changes to the zoning code. We're still working towards bringing you those revisions to the village's planned residential development tool for that final joint workshop with the village board. I anticipate right now one or both of those items will be in April. Stay tuned. To beat the question, your recommended changes concerning the Stonebridge development, that settlement agreement, those were approved by the village board at its last meeting. The board gave first reading approval to Half and Half Pizza, and they're due to consider final approval of that on Monday night. No new developments concerning Stonebridge, no new developments concerning any other notable properties in the village. So with that all said, one zoning planning adjacent topic that's been under discussion for quite some time. The village's Historic Preservation Commission has been working on changes to the rules of preservation in the village. So this was originally a plan proposed by the village's comprehensive plan in 1997. It came to be not too long after that. And then it's gone through a couple of revisions. As long as I've been with the village, actually, it's been under some form of study or another. And that has finally come together in a committee of the whole held a couple Mondays ago. So a number of different proposals. There's a memorandum attached that discusses all of those and the different places where they're going. In short, these regulations provide for how we try to preserve the important historic things in the village. We do that by, we have properties, right now all residential, They're designated as landmarks because they meet certain criteria about historic or cultural or architectural significance. At that point, they're subject to certain delays before they can be altered or demolished. The goal being that by working with applicants through those delays, we can balance property rights and give people access to certain incentives from the state, from others, from us, the village. But ultimately, at least in Lake Bluff, you can still choose to demolish at the end of this process if you so choose. And some of what this commission has been trying to work out is how to balance all these different interests, and a posture of the village that has typically been in favor of just that balance I described, right? So a whole list of different tweaks happening to preservation in the village. 2 of those are within this body's purview. The first is that historically you have a landmark. Almost always those are non-conforming structures. You saw a great example of that this evening. Older a structure is, the more likely it is to be non-conforming, and so those houses usually need help. From a zoning perspective, the commission has recommended that you just codify that we acknowledge in the code that structures that are historic, structures that are landmarked, really should have more favorable treatment or presumption or something like that when it comes to getting the support they need to be renovated or improved upon, preserved, rather than being demolished and rebuilt.
Glenn, is that going to be codified, meaning
Just put into the text of the code.
that's pretty vague? I mean,
It's up for this body to determine what exactly that looks like, right? And that's,
I see.
it was, I don't want to say intentionally vague, but it can look like a lot of different things.
So that's up for discussion.
Up for discussion, yeah. And then the second part, which I think is more interesting, but maybe a bit scarier, let's say, is just providing a fixed floor area bonus to these landmark designated structures. So we're not just trying to accommodate, so we have the context that many of these are non-conforming, many of these are too big, and so on. But we also want to make them economically attractive. We know that if we give people floor area that has a pretty good chance of turning into more house for them or for a future owner, that sooner or later it turns into cash, and that can be a very effective incentive. That's something that's been adopted by Winnetka, and then in a different context, Lake Forest does something similar too. The Historic Preservation Commission, they've looked at roughly a 20% bonus. There's been some talk of putting a cap on that, maybe in the neighborhood of 500 square feet or so. The memorandum shows some examples of what that looks like in practice. While we're really bringing this to you and discussing it, is just we want to hear your reactions. We want to plan out how we present this to you in the coming months. If there's a consensus that this all makes sense and we should do it, and we're pretty close, we might be able to handle that just in some of these other changes that are coming forward to you. If there's a sense that this needs more dedicated study, or if there's some disagreement on this board, we can structure that as a more intensive process. So just trying to get a sense of what your thoughts are on this topic.
I think we're finally getting to a point where we're using more of a carrot than a stick philosophy. I feel like that is so much more effective in historic preservation, instead of trying to restrict people from doing something because their house is old, but giving them a bonus because they're willing to preserve, I think is so much better. So I'm glad. I know the Historic Preservation Committee has worked on this tirelessly and for many years. So I'm glad that we're finally getting to a point where we actually have something to offer our residents. So full steam ahead.
Our body, just to clarify, our body wouldn't be opining at all on the financial incentives attached that are being discussed. You're going to ask us to comment on the FAR bonus and then the general codification, if you will, of the intent of the regulations.
That's correct.
But not any of this all, because most of this document pertains to the financial incentives that the board is contemplating.
Yes, so for context, it's really in 3 parts. These recommendations boil down into 3 parts. The first is, let's get new regulations, let's make them clear to read, let's make them work just administratively as best as we can, take all the drag out of them. That's on the village board's agenda for Monday night. The second is this zoning piece that's starting here with you this evening. And the third, all of these financial incentives, those will be considered by the board's finance committee at a future date. And I suspect, we'll see, this is typically the time we update our fees, update our assumptions for our budgets. It could be acted on relatively quickly. It could take additional time to consider it. So that's the context in which this discussion fits.
Glenn, one question I just noticed, the Part B allow up to a 20%. Obviously, we would be able to, through the variance process, do above and beyond 20% if hardship is proven. That none of that would be changed, right?
You'd always have that choice.
Okay, but the 20% is without special hardship. Okay, thank you.
Well, with that clarifier, I think that the 20% allowance is reasonable, considering that we need to have flexibility, and we should codify the flexibility for zoning. It's there's some beautiful old homes and older homes that we would like to be able to keep standing rather than starting over. So if we can encourage people to work within that, I think that's a very positive development.
And could you clarify at all what you mean by subject to PCZBA's review? If we're going to allow it up to 20%, are we then talking about developing standards to actually allow it? Or what's meant by the phrase subject to PCZBA's review?
Yeah.
If we're going to allow it?
Yeah, so that was the HPC's recommendation, and there's different ways to look at this. I'd think about it as a continuum, right? So the more certainty you give a property owner, probably the more valuable this allowance looks for that owner and for future owners. But also there's more, let's call it risk or uncertainty, right? That someone could do something indelicate or what have you. That you could have something that imposes more on neighbors or on other property owners. And so there might be a balancing act to consider, right? So at one extreme you have, here's 20%, take it at run, if you can build it, build it. And at, let's say the other extreme, it's you can go over, but you're going to have to come here and you're going to have to meet standards. That could be by the HPC, that could be by the PCZBA, what have you. There's different ways to structure that process. There can be points in between, right? So I believe, I know there's a proposal in Hinsdale that hasn't been fully fledged, that has a number of standards and a plan commission type of review. I believe the Winnetka one has something similar. There are, for example, our other bonuses in the code right now don't have a discretionary review. If you want to build a porch, you can build a porch, for example. So it's up to you what your comfort level is in making a recommendation.
Would this board be the judge of what is a historically significant building or home?
It presumably would not. So the HPC, right now, before we get into zoning, right, you have what you think is a historically significant house. You make an application to be designated as a landmark. The HPC reviews it, makes a recommendation to the village board, just as you would for many of the jobs that this board has, and the board would approve it. So presumably, by the time that this gets to, one of these situations gets to you to act upon, a completely different, tentacle of the village has made those determinations and has built that record for you.
So the 20% would only apply to those homes that are landmark status?
That's correct. Right now, there's, I believe, 21 or 22. There have been a few more that have been demolished over the years. It's, you could assume, from our prior pace, it's about one a year.
I know the HBC is hoping to accelerate that, or At least,
I think
at
that
least
is their
was
hope,
about a year
yes.
and a half ago.
They are, the goal of this is to accelerate that, yeah. With that said, how much can they accelerate it? I don't know. They've identified a short list of homes we can circulate that they think are of particular interest to work with homeowners to landmark. At the most, I'd be surprised if you're ever talking about more than 50 homes unless we're having a very, very good day and a very busy day. So it's a pretty small universe. By comparison, a little over 2,000 homes in the village, so a couple percent.
In a home that is landmarked, what's the process right now if someone then wants to put an addition on? That could be considerable. I'm just looking, I was actually surprised that only 5 of the 20 on the list here are over the FAR. So it's not all that considerable in terms of homes not complying with the rules. But once again, if someone has a home landmarked and they decide that they want to do a considerable addition or any addition on the home, what's the process?
Yeah, so assuming they need no zoning relief, they submit for review by the HPC. That's probably in the form of the building permit they would seek already. I think the HPC can hold that for, I believe it's 30 days at the HPC, and then in theory, the board could extend it another 30. I'll check that here in a moment. And then at the end of that, if they were so inclined, whether or not they had a favorable reception, they could still proceed and get their building permit.
Oh, so someone that's, say, only at 50% of their allowable house size now, they get their home landmarked, they could, in theory, completely change the outside of the home, in other words, build a larger home around it, and just wait out the time period and then build anyway? Is that what you just said?
That is
extreme
how the
case?
ordinance works in the extreme case. That particular example, building around it, if you were to enclose parts of the existing house, you're starting to count towards a demolition calculation, even if you don't actually knock walls down. So hate to be particular, but yeah, you could make very substantial changes and still have a very relatively short time frame to do that in. So let's take, one proposal advanced by the HPC at one, earlier in this conversation was, we have all these incentives and maybe you shouldn't be able to receive these for a project unless the HPC approves that project. And so that is a simple element you can incorporate into this, right? To not add extra procedural steps, but to still get a bit of control there, for example.
It would seem logical to me that there should be some sort of check, because if they, and that, we're not judging on the fees, but if you start creating financial incentives that are getting close to $100,000, and then a homeowner could go and substantially change the outside of the home that was just landmarked a half a year after the process. I hope that that there is some thinking going on to provide the check and balances, because I'm totally in favor of trying to create some incentives to preserve the older homes in the community, but at the same time, you can't create so many incentives that it will encourage people to landmark their homes solely for the purpose of saving substantial amounts of money, and then a year or two later come back and totally change the appearance of the home. That hopefully the safeguards can be built into the system, so.
Yeah, that is
I think that
certainly
was,
a
that was
risk.
kind of my concern. I know we're not talking about the incentives or the financial incentives, but to give, I think I read that there's also incentives for previous landmarked homes that would get a break in, or a discount, right? Or they would get money back.
Yeah, so that was a discussion at the HPC, right? And it's an interesting policy question. On the one hand, you're making incentives to bring in new landmarks. On the other hand, you have all these people who landmarked you know,
Previously.
out of goodwill, really, and so do you try to recognize them or reward them? You know, there's always that happens, that question happens all the time in government, right? How do you, you know, there's a term for it, an academic term, but it's escaping me right now.
I mean, hey, I'm all for the carrot versus the stick, but, you know, I think there's also an element of, you know, maybe there's, again, we're just talking the zoning. I know we're not talking about the financial part of it, but, you know, I'm very intrigued with what they're doing. I totally appreciate, I'm sure they've had months of discussions and trying to figure out what's the best so to speak, formula to make this move forward. And, you know, getting the square footage is rather intriguing. I'm just not in favor of, again, it's not our board, but, you know, giving all these incentives financially with our village, trying to be strong and stay strong through the times that we've just faced, so.
Well, I think we should commend Chair Kraus and the exemplary work that he and his entire team have done over the last several years, because I think it's been quite a challenge, and they've worked very, very hard to come up with quite an intriguing document. With respect to the floor area bonus, there was some talk about perhaps capping it at some figure, and I don't know if somebody had mentioned 500 square feet. Maybe that's too low, but is a cap, at least preliminarily, something that should be considered, just to avoid some sort of unanticipated consequence? You know, be it 750 or whatever.
How did they come up with that number? Yeah.
It's been a bit. I'd have to refresh myself. I know you can back into when that cap starts to matter based on lot area, and I think you're at a pretty large size lot by the time it matters, but it would take me a couple minutes to remember that.
I think the codifying zoning flexibility, you know, subparagraph A is pretty relatively straightforward. And subparagraph B, some sort of a floor area bonus. I know the tremendous amount of work's gone into it. It's well thought out. It's just a matter of what sort of a recommendation we would make to the village council. I'm not sure if there's any more information that we could have, other than what's been done already.
Yeah, so if my math's right here, that 500 square foot cap basically starts to matter at above a 6250. So that's the typical lot in the
Small
R4
lot,
area. Yeah, 125 by 50. And you could adjust it. So you take that to 7,500. You could take that to 10,000. I mean, at a certain point, what's interesting and what you see in the attachments, right, is as soon as you start to get into the estates, it's very rare for these houses to actually hit up against floor area. Most of the houses that are landmarked today are in these estate areas. I'm speaking without the list in front of me, but many are, because those were very architecturally notable houses, and they have plenty of room to spread out if they wanted to. It's really when we look in the original part of town and in the east side and the old camp meeting ground that we get into maybe some more of these borderline cases. And of course, I'll say too, without diving too much in the weeds, partially the floor area, the scaling, the way our floor area scales is also meant to favor these smaller lots as well.
What's our goal tonight, Glenn?
Yeah, so I think it sounds like zoning flexibility we have great consensus on. It sounds like that's Again, that's pretty easy for us to slip into some things we're planning to bring you soon anyway. It sounds like, I'm not hearing a whole lot of hesitation about floor area. We just need to find the right way to write it up and structure it. So we'll probably take that zoning flexibility part, we'll put it into those changes when they come forward to you, we'll highlight that. And then the floor area part, you might see that as a standalone item in the next month or two, probably under my staff report, or as a workshop item for your consideration, just depending on when the pace of these other items. And if that sounds like a good course of action, we'll do just that.
Reasonable to me.
Yes.
Sounds good.
Very good. That would conclude my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Agenda item number 7, Commissioners' Report. Hearing none. Agenda item number 8, adjournment.
Adjourned.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Great to be back together as a group.
Normal.
That's nice.